This is Common Filth Radio, episode 15. Thank you very much for listening. If you are a returning listener, thank you very much for your loyalty. And if you are new, thank you for giving us a shot. A great bulk of this show is dedicated to answering your questions about pretty much anything, but if you've listened before, you have a good idea of what I like to talk about. So send me your questions at my email address, which is commonfilth@commonfilth.com. If you like what you hear, check out the Amazon.com link below. Click on that, and it'll open a new window or tab. And in that new window or tab, you can search for your products, add those products to your cart, check out, and your total purchase, I get a percentage of it at no additional cost to you. For the first part of the show, I had an idea for most of the week of what I was going to talk about, which is the abuse of young boys and how that relates to the creation of alpha males. But I think that idea deserves a lot more elaboration than a 40 to 60 minute podcast can provide. Instead, I'm going to talk about insufficient distraction. And I came upon this idea after recalling a memory about a desperate human who I was awoken by at some weird hour of the morning. It was a younger woman, gravelly voiced woman, banging on somebody's door. I assume this is her home, but a lot of people live there. And she would shout for all the neighborhood to hear, "You took my weed. Give me back my weed. I need my weed." I don't know much about this woman, but I know enough about her life because she shouts it for all the world to hear. Even though she has several baby daddies, several illegitimate children, that she's yelled at and yelled about before. Loser, wayward boyfriends, unwanted children are all I know about this person. That and the "give me back my weed, you took my weed," and so on. From this little glimpse I get of this person's life, who I don't know, who I've never met, but I've heard a lot about, I can tell that her banging on the door, shouting, "Where's my weed? Give me back my weed," and any other variation of that, it's not really about the weed. The missing weed is simply the last thing this woman has to hold on to. Through either bad things that have happened to her or bad decisions that she has made. I'm not sure of this. But it is not about the weed. Because even if she didn't have it, her life would still be in this bizarre, shabby state. We might laugh and shake our heads at such a strange and sensational situation, but it all happens to us in very minor ways, or more major ways. But what do I mean by it? It being that one last bit of distraction that we hold on to that keeps us from confronting ourselves. For this woman, it's her weed. But maybe if you're listening to this, for your parents, it's you. They put their energy into you because they hate each other. And they made this terrible decision to spend their lives together, but they cannot confront this because there's too much time invested in it. Eventually, the child goes away. And if they have more than one child, the children will eventually go away. They will have their own lives, their own interests, their own schedules, and there's suddenly a void where for however many years the parents had this distraction to keep them from confronting their own ugliness, their own hideousness, their own cruelty. As mad and counterproductive as this may seem, this may be the best option for anyone. People who do not know how to live in silence, people who do not know dignity, this is the best course for them to take. But it is still not without victims. For if you use somebody else as a distraction, they will become a victim to your hurtful words, behaviors, things you aren't even aware of. Human nature is the underlying disease of everything that I have mentioned thus far. It's true that we are stronger with other people. We are stronger as a whole rather than as individuals. But the group cannot be strong if you're treating other people as if they are products to be consumed, as if they are resources to be consumed. A consumerist mindset with regard to people, with regard to anything, leads to destruction and removal. This is what the majority of people do to one another. They mistreat their wives, sons, daughters, husbands, because there's something deeply, deeply wrong with them. And they have no idea how to get rid of that, how to cure that. I believe that the teachings of Christ are the best way to remove yourself from the filth which contains you. But unfortunately, people are hostile to that idea because, again, a lot of people like to use the institution of something like a church to satisfy demonic impulses, to mistreat, to abuse. So there's an idea there. I'm not quite done exploring that, but don't treat people as if they're some sponge that soaks up whatever dirt that you have inside of you, whatever horrible, awful material you have inside of you, because it's not going to get rid of your dysfunction. It's just going to multiply it. Don't be an emotional parasite. Do not consume people's spiritual, emotional resources, because it's a very evil thing to do. Do not distract yourself with those things. But what happens when we distract ourselves with something other than people? Well, you get things like feminism and social justice and any other offshoot of leftist nonsense. And this offshoot I'm about to mention is gay marriage, not groom and groom or bride and bride, but the people who are like, yeah, gay is okay, homophiles. Not homosexual people, but people who, I guess you could call it ideological fetishizing of the homosexual. The people who do this the most, I see, are women, both young and not so young. And I have a theory as to why this is. Typically, these kinds of people, their lives are oriented around what's going on in their social calendar. Events, big blowouts. That's what they live for. The next big event, rather than taking appreciation and noticing beauty in small, quiet moments. A wedding is typically a pretty big event because, many people want a stage, and that's the biggest stage they likely will ever have. At least for the lady. It means a lot more to the lady than it does to the man. But because we were more focused on the bride than we are the groom, women tend to get jealous and sad at that. Which is why I think it's odd that they go to these weddings anyway, if that's how it makes them feel. They aren't the focus of attention. The lady in the white dress is. She is the queen for the day. She is the princess for the day. She is royalty for the day. I mean, I understand wanting to get free drinks and free food and having an excuse to dress nice and to socialize with people you like, other than, the bitch you're jealous at because she has a husband and you don't. This may all sound very shallow and petty, but guess what? Look at the type of people we're dealing with here. And this is why women like the idea of gay marriage and why they're like always having these equality stickers on their car. Is because they think equality is this higher ideal, even though the reason for it is that they don't want to feel jealous at high-profile events. Women are sexual competitors, and when they attend a woman's wedding, that's them recognizing, look, I won. I have a steady partner. Somebody to constantly fill me up with babies, and you don't. A gay man to a woman is a sexual non-entity. So she likes that. She doesn't have to view it with any sort of cynicism. That's also something I could extrapolate into something more substantial than a couple of minutes of monologue on a podcast, but I don't think anybody else has had that idea yet, so I'm getting it out there. I am the first to put that out into the ether, unless there is, of course, somebody that I'm unaware of that has had the same idea. And if there is, credit to them, I had no idea. So as I'm recording this, the Darren Wilson verdict came in from the grand jury, and to anyone who's been paying attention to this shit, it's found that he is a good boy. He didn't do nothing. I mean, unless your name is Anthony Fontano, it's not surprising, but if it is, I'm sure it is quite surprising, because the good boys who make your favorite kind of music, they can do nothing wrong, and your worldview is centered around that. Which I've explained before, I think in episode 8 or 9, how I think that he's stupid, but I'm not going to rag on him any further because he's simply not worth it. But this is just an obligatory mention because I'm sure I'm bound to get some questions about this, and that's fine, but I honestly don't have much to say about it. You look at the facts, you look at the situation, and you realize that the decision the grand jury made was the correct one. I just watched Ramsey Paul's video about it, and he wants some destruction because that's very entertaining, and I can't say that I disagree because, yeah, it would be very entertaining and it's what we would expect, but all I know about it right now is that there's some cars on fire and there's some alleged gunshots, not confirmed, so I might have more to talk about next week because a lot can happen between now and next week with regards to the protests occurring. But let's not get caught up on that for too long because I have this idea popped into my head and I posted this on my page Tumblristas some hours ago at the time of this recording, that I've been posting screenshots from Tumblr on that page that don't necessarily fit the anti-social justice warrior narrative. Things that fall under the jurisdiction of body positive, bottom problems, and by jurisdiction I mean tags on Tumblr. So people have been reacting negatively to like these gross chicks posting naked pictures of themselves with their horrible deformed bodies. And they've also been reacting negatively to the other posts like bottom problems, in which certain types of people of certain types of sexual orientation talk about how, there's fecal matter and all this other disgusting stuff that I'm not going to mention right now. These people, they say, I thought this was an anti-social justice warrior page. No, it's an anti-leftist page. I view all these things under the same banner of the egalitarian death cult. And this is why I think that anti-social justice warriors are simply another branch of political correctness or mind control or cultural Marxism. A long time ago, a guy named Fringe Elements or All Nations Party on YouTube talked about this, how anti-feminism is political correctness, and at the time I did not agree with him. But now that feminism is now included under the social justice warrior banner, which I don't like that term, but we're going to go with it since that's what most people are familiar with. Now I agree with him because I'm seeing the types of people who react negatively towards feminist misbehavior or social justice warrior misbehavior. They still believe that institutionalized sexual deviancy is okay, and they think that people posting about it is okay. People airing their dirty laundry is okay. Showing a complete lack of loyalty, that's just fine. And now I realize that you need to be much more explicit with these people that, oh, we're just anti-SJW because they react knee-jerk to everything. No, that's why you don't like them. Their reactions to things have nothing to do with... The way they express disgust has nothing to do with my criticisms or my peers' criticisms of it. I got a message regarding my stance on anti-SJWs, which I still am, but let's be clear, I'm a different kind. I'm a different breed of it. Much more different than you, who still believe in equality and all this other bullshit we know doesn't exist. This guy said to me, social justice warrior is a term hijacked by right-wingers who still want it to be the 1950s. Are you fucking kidding me? The fact that this guy, whoever he is, used the wow, just wow, it's 2014 line on me in different words, to be fair. It's proof to me that anti-SJWs are on board with the social justice ideas. It's just that they don't like the medium of the message. They don't like how it's being said, because it reflects poorly on their stupid worldview. So let me tell you, your worldview is already stupid, and you don't need SJWs to prove that. I am not on your side. Even though we might dislike the same people, I don't believe in the notion that the enemy of my enemy is my friend. The enemy of my enemy is also my enemy. I'm not here to tell you, make you think in your own head, well, at least I'm not that bad. No, you are that bad. You're just quieter about it. Anti-SJW, you better be careful throwing that term around with respect to identifying yourself with it. Because if you're listening to this, yeah, you might believe in equality, you might believe in egalitarianism, but you believe the same shit as the social justice crowd. You agree with them. You just don't agree with the way they go about it. So keep that in mind. Remember whose side you're on. Are you on the side of decency? Or are you on the side of crazy red-haired women, dyed red-haired women, apple red-haired women yelling at Canadians' men's rights activists? And don't act like you're on neither side. That you're for equality, but you're against pulling fire alarms because people are expressing ideas you don't agree with. Equality can only produce hideousness, mediocrity, and anything else in between. So, you either like it or you don't. You like the hideousness or you don't. And with the amount of negative reactions I got for posting these body positive pictures, I think you're on the side of ugliness, so again, you're no friend of mine. This is just proof that anything that is not explicitly anti-leftist is bound to become co-opted by them, and I'm beginning to put a stop to that over on Tumblristas, which is the most influential thing I do with regard to what I do on the internet. I just don't get it. You see what these crazy people believe, and you see how they express it, and you don't like how they express it, but the bottom line is you're still on the same team. And I don't understand how you can have the cognitive dissonance to justify that. To mention the body positive images I was posting earlier in the week, late last week rather, I posted an image of somebody who was responding to something in their inbox, and they're like, I don't like the way my anus looks at. Amongst many other things, that was the part of the post I chose to emphasize. And somebody in the comment section said, oh, well, if you don't like your anus, just bleach it. Completely missing the point. Why would you be looking at your own anus in the first place? You should be concerned with the pathology that would lead to this desire to change the look of your anus because you looked at it too much. But what can I expect? I'm dealing with millennials by and large, so to expect anything different from them would be too high of an expectation. I have a lot of notes that I took throughout the week of things I'd like to talk about. I'm starting to carry around a notebook, and I'm finding it to be highly beneficial with regard to documenting my ideas, because a lot of this stuff I've already forgotten about. But Pro Tools tells me that I've been talking for almost 20 minutes, so let's get into your questions. If you would like to have your question answered, again, you can email me at the email address that you are looking at, or can look at on the YouTube video, the title card, commonfilth@commonfilth.com, or you can check in the description below for my Ask FM account if you would want to submit a question anonymously. I got a few of those questions again this week. But first, we're going to start off with the questions I received either through Facebook or email. This question comes from our good friend Shay. I was wondering if you heard about Dr. Matt Taylor and the controversy surrounding the shirt he chose to wear for the achievement video for landing a probe on a distant comet. I was wondering your thoughts on it. Obviously, many people have shared their thoughts on this, and I am probably the last person to do so. And anybody with a lick of sense obviously thinks the outrage surrounding a shirt that he wore is just ridiculous, because it's a shirt with cartoon women on it, and they aren't even naked. They're in bikinis or whatever, and the shirt was given to him by a lady. This man accomplished something that is more impressive given the context in which he accomplished it, given that there's not much left to do in post-war 21st century civilization. He found a very, very difficult niche, and he went out and did it. He achieved it, and he deserves all the credit in the world for that. But an angle that I want to uncover, that I've uncovered in different episodes, in different contexts, is that feminists like to say that men are only hostile towards feminism because it's not about men, which is just proof that they're projecting onto the rest of us, because feminists made this accomplishment about them because he wore some shirt that they found distasteful. I was just listening to Stefan Molyneux talk about this, how when somebody gets upset or offended, and so that's somebody happening to be a woman, we suddenly care about it, because I have no idea. It's just we as men are more sensitive to female hysteria, because, women are good at pointing out problems. They're not very good at fixing them. That's why men exist. But men are becoming less sensitive to this, because look at what they're complaining about. A man wearing a shirt given to him by a lady because it has women with boobs on it. But men in STEM, given that they've been in the academic environment for so long, are still taking seriously the perverse moanings and crowings of these idiots. So, crying about it, apologizing for it, was a terrible mistake on his behalf, but he had no idea that it was a mistake, because he's not spending his time exploring society and the attitudes and trends going on with it. He's spending his time achieving something, advancing himself, advancing his craft. I don't blame him for spending his time in this way, because it achieves a hell of a lot more than anything else anybody could possibly be doing. But this is why you need strong alpha males to crack some heads, to defend people like this, to make sure nobody fucks with people like this. And in Shay's message, he showed me a very good screenshot on Tumblr about how he shouldn't have wore that offensive shirt and he deserves it. And then somebody pointed out the hypocrisy, so saying that, oh, so he was asking for it, poking fun at their moaning about rape culture. Probably not the most original assessment I've made on the Shirtgate business, but a lot of time has passed since it happened, and there's all the angles have sort of been exhausted. So, but I think it's the truth. I think that it's honest, and I think that it is accurate. Our next question comes from George Costanza Memes, which is a page on Facebook. So if you want, you could go check them out. They write, in your previous episodes, you mentioned that you feel physical labor is ideal and also expressed disdain for bureaucratic work. How do you feel about non-physical workers who actually help produce things rather than adding to the bureaucracy, such as engineers and computer programmers? I think that physical labor is ideal for average IQ people and below average IQ people, because it would redirect their impulses in a way that would be healthy for themselves and society. You often see people of average IQ or below average IQ fall into the welfare trap, or even worse, leading a criminal lifestyle. So in that respect, yeah, physical labor is ideal because most people are of an average IQ or below average IQ. Very few people are rare, very few people are exceptional, and very few people rise above the genetic means which contain them. For average IQ people, it wouldn't be impossible to become a computer programmer or a engineer, because there is something to be said for hard work and determination and putting in hours, whereas somebody who is more intelligent might not need as much time to learn the concepts involved with those things. So I am completely in favor of people learning skilled non-physical labor like computer programming or any kind of engineering, because it does produce a net positive for society rather than obstructing or stealing, which is what bureaucracies do. The problem we have is that we do have above average people or exceptional people, but they're encouraged to go into these stupid fields of study like the humanities, anthropology, sociology, and so on and so on. Of course, you have a lot of average to below average people in those fields, but there's a lot of people who have the potential to be good. A lot of people are being lost to that. And it doesn't have to be computer programmers or engineers, it could be doctors. Surgeon is a physical thing. I consider that physical because you need to have steady hands. You need to be very able-bodied to cut people open and make sure you're not causing any serious damage. People are typically very lazy, and currently the academic structure, K through 12 through college, it's rewarding laziness. It's much easier to get a grade in your English class watching movies and writing papers about movies rather, than it is to get a good grade studying biology or studying anatomy. This is like the example my friends at Humanity 3 posted, rest in peace, about the person in high school who's like, I'm really smart. I don't know how to fix my car, but I got an A on my paper about The Fault in Our Stars or some other bullshit like that. I might have said this before on some previous episode, but I'll say it again. To whom are we more thankful? A shrill college-educated woman telling us to check our privilege, or our mechanic who gets our car up and running? Are you thankful to the bureaucrat at the department of whatever telling you to sign this form, that form, and this form, and oh, by the way, give me $80? Or are you thankful to the guy who programmed the video game that you like to spend your free time playing? You can create endless amounts of scenarios using this formula I've given to you in this segment. It really highlights the worthlessness of so many people. How can an independent woman be independent if her job is funded by the taxpayer? 9 times out of 10. Maybe that's an overestimation, but not much of one. If you're working for the government, you're not independent. The government worker is completely dependent on the surgeon, the programmer, the engineer, the plumber, the mechanic, the janitor. All people much more worthy than the government employee. And if anyone out there wants to tell me that the post office and road maintenance, road builders, road pavers are examples of productive government employees, you can fuck right off, because the post office hasn't received any taxpayer money since the 1980s. And road maintenance, road building, road paving, that's contracted out to private companies. So, fuck off. Policemen and firemen would be in demand regardless of whether there was a state to fund them or not. So, those people I consider productive because they are providing a demanded service. But let's move on. Thank you, George Costanza Memes, for the question. This next question is from Jay. As you may or may not know, earlier this year, 2 filmmakers made a Kickstarter campaign for their fat positive documentary, Fatitude. It managed to get fully funded plus a little extra. Fast forward to today, the film is nearing completion and will likely be purchased and viewed by SJWs and women's studies college classes around the country. What are your general thoughts on all this besides the obvious? Do you think that this movie will actually make an impact and give a foothold for fat activists to try and end fat shaming, or will it be a total flop that will quickly fade into obscurity? It makes me ill to know that these people believe I shit you not, this is an exact quote. We have a strong cultural belief system that fat is bad and that it's killing us, but we really don't have much evidence to back up those claims. Anyway, sorry for making this so long. Can't wait for the next episode. Keep up the good work, man. Thank you for the question. You shared a couple of links in the email, which I will get to after I answer this question, but I'm sure it will be popular amongst the people who want to rationalize away their unhealthiness and their unhealthiness to the point where it's actually a disease. The movie might shame some naive freshman, sophomore types in college who are like, oh, that's so sad. We shouldn't make people feel sad because feeling sad is bad. But even if a lot of people do end up seeing this movie, I don't think that it'll change the mostly negative attitudes people have towards obesity. Civilization may repress certain visceral reactions that we may liken to the cruelty of nature, but nature, even when it is suppressed by civilization or over-civilization, as we're dealing with here when it comes to fat acceptance types of people, nature finds a way to assert itself. And I think nature in this respect is that visceral disgust we feel when we see morbidly obese people. When we see it, we don't need to rationalize it as if it's bad. We can tell within less than a second that that person is deformed. That person is damaged. There is a reason why you don't see elderly obese people. So the makers of this film might be able to shame some people into not fat shaming for some period of time, but it's not going to last. Because we see an obese person, our primitive brain thinks that person hogs too many resources. That person requires too many calories to sustain itself. It's a threat. And sure, you could say that the primitive brain is wrong when it is reacting to this because scarcity isn't so much of an issue now, but it still is unhealthy and damaging because you still have to associate with these people. These people are you to some very minor extent. We share some sort of commonality with these people, no matter how loose and nebulous that might be. But great question, and thank you again for it. We're going to answer Blue's question next. How do you feel about the use of the no true Scotsman fallacy being used to defend feminism? For example, I'm glad you're making fun of SJWs. That isn't real feminism, as if their egalitarian fantasy is any better. Yeah, I didn't realize when I was addressing this earlier that I was sort of answering this question, but I'll talk about it a little more. This trend you mentioned is really annoying to me because I work hard at building these spaces for people who aren't really leftist and who aren't indoctrinated into egalitarianism. I get people who in one series of keystroke laugh at the absurdity of some crazy feminist talking about something crazy, and then the next they'll say like, oh, what's wrong with this? I don't see anything wrong with this, when it's some guy on Tumblr talking about how he can't bottom tonight because he had Chipotle for lunch. The underlying issue with social justice warriors is that they have a complete lack of decency, they have a complete lack of dignity, they have a complete lack of humility. So when you get people who are like, oh, I don't like SJWs, what about anti-SJW? I thought this was anti-SJW, and then post like, oh, what's wrong with this? I don't see anything wrong with this with regard to something so completely disgusting that no normal, decent human being could defend it. I laugh at them because they don't realize how similar they are to those they claim to oppose. I understand that deviancy and disgusting behavior have existed in every society that has ever existed. But when it becomes a matter of public record and public acceptance, that's crossing the line. When it is accepted, more people do it. More people engage in their vices. More people spread diseases. If you don't believe me, herpes shaming is becoming a thing. There's nothing wrong with herpes, it's just a rash. Herpes shaming is a part of rape culture. You patriarch pig. Satire is basically impossible at this point because even if you do post something satirical, it's so within the realm of possibility that it's hardly funny. And no, herpes shaming, STD shaming, you can look that shit up. Go tumblr.com/tagged/std-shaming, and you'll find it. Last of the email questions. You use the word narcissism to describe millennials and various other things. Do you feel like the word hedonism could also be used to describe such people or things? Thanks as always. And that question came from Vincent. Thank you, Vincent. I absolutely would use the word hedonist or hedonism to describe narcissistic people, because when you are a narcissist, you think that life is just one big game and it's the only purpose is to have a lot of fun and feel those warm fuzzies or your heart going doki doki all the time. What the hedonist doesn't realize is that in order to feel good, you have to feel bad sometimes. If you feel good all the time, then your body will become used to the stimulation. Your brain will become used to it. And all of a sudden, you're going to need to chase more extreme highs, and that leads to very destructive places. Millennials are taught that the most important thing in life is your happiness, and any sort of physical or emotional discomfort needs to be avoided, and it needs to be removed from your life. So everyone, including people who are not millennials, lead this very phoned-in, happy-go-lucky, easy kind of life, even though there's probably some things that they need to be working on. And they need to be working on it at a higher priority than the other things that they're doing, like going to a restaurant for the sole purpose of posting about it on Facebook. Look, I'm at the bar, I got this cool drink. Look, everyone, I took a picture of my drink that I'm having at this restaurant. But this is really sad because I view this as a silent form of desperation, or not so silent, whatever, because they're not taught to be comfortable within themselves. Because they know that they are empty, shallow people. They are spiritually dead, and they are not reviving themselves by these hedonistic pursuits. And I just mentioned one of the most mild forms of it. There are far more worse manifestations of it. But I guess leading a morally sound life is just too oppressive and too 1950s. Like our friends over at the rightstuff.biz say, you're miserable because you're free. Alright, that's the last of the email questions, so let's get into your Ask FM questions. These are all sent in anonymously, so I don't know who sent them. There's no name on them. The first one. Hey CF, what are your thoughts on Putin and the general state of Russia? When it comes to Russia, I see a lot of problems that they still need to resolve. They have an incredibly high abortion rate, lots of alcoholism, and child pornography is legal there, if I'm not mistaken. I don't view Putin as some savior of the white race, but there are some things that he's doing that I can appreciate, like reasserting Orthodox Christianity in Russian culture. He carries himself like an actual man, unlike the President of the United States. I also saw some headline on Drudge Report that indicated that Russia might be gunning for Finland next, so that would be interesting. I'd like to see that. If they make it over there, I'd like to see them take out Sweden as well. Alright, next one. What do you think of Latin America, Eastern Europe, Asia, and other places that seem to have preserved their more traditional customs and social rules? Also, what do you think about Europe in general when it comes to degeneracy in customs and social roles? If I'm not mistaken, Latin America, much of it has a tradition of Catholicism, and I think Poland has some pretty heavily Catholic influence as well, but Eastern Europe has Orthodox Christianity. Because those locations have that tradition, they have that foundation that they take at least somewhat seriously. I think they're in better shape in the long term than a place like America, where, let's face it, it's very godless, it's very rootless, and that's because it's very young, but it is what it is. And Asia, specifically China, while they are godless, they have history as their guide because they've expanded, retracted, and done that several times over. So I'm not a big fan of the Chinese, but I can appreciate their orientation towards the future, how they can plan across several generations what they're going to do. As for Europe in general, I'm at a loss. I'm of mixed European stock, so and I was born in America, so I don't have much skin in the game there, but it is still very upsetting to see. From what I understand, national pride used to be very common in Europe, and I think it still is in places like Spain and Italy and Greece. The further up north you go, the more masochistic they get. It would seem that the various world wars that occurred in Europe seem to crush the white man's will to live. Look, we got rid of some enemies, some very necessary enemies, so that you can enjoy unchecked prosperity and peace. This is why Sweden is overrun with Somalians, and other European locales are overrun with multiculti demographics and subsequent propaganda supporting it. Next one. Could you make more movie reviews, especially films like Nightcrawler, that you found have reactionary themes? I find that popular fiction tends to have much more reactionary and pulp themes than art fiction. I think the reason you find reactionary themes in popular fiction is because it's a product of democracy. And democracy assumes that everybody is capable of making good decisions. But narratives, when they're told through the lens of the common person, which are stories that I like the most, you find that democracy is a failure because most people are incapable of making good decisions. And the nature of narrative requires a conflict, and a conflict generally happens when somebody makes a bad decision. This is why I don't like superhero movies, because superheroes shield people from their idiocy, from their weakness. Here in reality, there will be no hero. There will be no one to rescue you. But that's what Hollywood is mostly interested in, not superheroes necessarily, although they've been milking that for quite some time, but in general, ideas of escapism. This is why I don't do too many movie reviews, because when I do see a movie, it's usually in the realm of escapism, which is fine, you know. I'm not saying that I don't enjoy it, but there's not much for me to say about it. But I'm glad you enjoyed the Nightcrawler review analysis thing that I did last week, because it's rare that I find a movie that can spark my imagination to get me to talk about it, other than just what happened in the movie. It seems that when a movie seeks to have a message, it's far too heavy-handed with it, and it's usually some leftist tripe. But when I find movies that actually focus on something small and something limited, I find that there are themes that introduce themselves that I find interesting. And they generally don't intend to have these sorts of themes that we find in them, but I like it better that way. For example, another movie that I really liked was the Dread, the 2012 film. It just took place in one location throughout most of the movie, and it had a lot to say, intentionally or unintentionally. I couldn't tell, about the perils of multiculturalism. So those are just a few movies. In their simplicity, end up saying a lot more than just, oh, here's what happened. Here's what's in front of you. That's all there is to say about it. All right, next question and last question for this week. CF, it's becoming commonplace that I see my friends idolizing Russell Brand in his call for revolution. What are your opinions on his ideology, and do you agree with him? I think he's an idiot, because he probably talks about income inequality, and he probably supports open borders, not realizing that shipping off factory jobs overseas and importing cheap labor is what destroys the middle class. What we understand traditionally as economic leftism, social leftism, and cultural leftism, they're all very incompatible with each other. They want to close the gap between the rich and the poor, but they don't realize that such a thing is impossible if you have open borders, if you have multiculturalism. And it's impossible if you let factories ship out jobs to third world nations while importing third worlders to do cheap labor. And that's what he probably believes, because I'm sure he's called people racist without any trace of irony. I think if you're looking for a Anglo celebrity to look up to, you should look up to Eric Clapton. He has a famous quote that you should look up, but I can't repeat here because of reasons. Look up Rock Against Racism, everyone. They were the first SJWs. That's all for the questions for this week. If you'd like to have your question answered, again, you can email me, commonfilth@commonfilth.com, or check the Ask FM link in the description below. This was the last episode of the month of November, and next week will be the first episode of the month of December. And at the beginning of next week's show, I will make a exciting announcement regarding something I'm working on, and I think you're going to be excited about it too, because it's going to be really cool. As always, it's been a pleasure to talk to you all. It's been a pleasure to answer your questions. It's been a pleasure to read your feedback. It's an all-around joy. So thank you so much for listening. It really means a lot to me. One last minor thing to notify you of: I will be changing the upload schedule a little bit. The last 2 weeks I've been uploading a select segment from Tuesday's show on Thursday. I'm going to start doing that on Sunday instead. So Sunday and Tuesday I'll be uploading, and yeah, that just about does it. So again, thank you so much for listening. I'll see you guys next week.